Hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Smith. I am a third degree brown belt in Isshinryu Karate. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing Isshinryu Karate, Sanchin Kata, the sequence with I forget which leg is forward by that time, but there's a point in the kata where you do a sequence of three double spear hands from the hips and you're breathing out, and there's slow motion in the kata, but in a fight, you would do this full speed. But in the kata, for breathing purposes and muscle tension, they're slow motion. And you basically are aiming under the floater ribs of your opponent. Okay. Uh, and when you get to the end of the spear hands, you do a double horizontal chop block, which basically you're told in the bunkai that you are in fact gripping the floater ribs and breaking them and going into the chop block. Okay. Now, the question that somebody might ask is, does that even work? Is it physically possible to hit somebody so hard under the floater ribs that you can in fact grip the floater ribs and break them with a spear hand? I don't know for certain if that's possible because I probably am not strong enough to do it myself. But especially since I've had type 2 diabetic nerve pain for the past 15 years. But I do still have a 600-pound right cross, but I don't know that my spear hand is that strong because I like Goju-Ryu practitioners and some Isshinryu practitioners will get like a bucket of sand when they start doing it, and they'll throw their eye gouge and their spear hand down into the bucket of sand and do maybe 100 reps a day in a bucket of sand until they build up enough finger strength and arm strength if they then start working with small gravel pebbles or marbles. All right. So I'm just not obsessive enough to do 100 reps a day of spear hands and eye gouges into a bucket of sand or marbles. So I might not be the best in the world to ask about that, but I believe that there probably are some Isshinryu and Goju-Ryu practitioners that can, in fact, break your floater ribs with a double spear hand or a single spear hand. But I'm not one of them. At least I don't think so. Uh, so, but I think it is possible. I've just never seen anyone that obsessed enough about it to believably. Now, my fourth degree black belt sensei that did most of my teaching, Mark Myers, now he's a seventh degree black belt. When he was in his prime at 235 pounds and a fourth degree black belt, he probably could do it because he did, in fact, practice some, but not like obsessively, spearhanding and eye gouging into buckets of sand and gravel because he actually showed us and had us practice it a couple times. And we know that he did do that, but not like some of them where they'll sit there and spend an hour every day doing that. I don't think that's worth it because you got other things to work on than just building up calluses on your fingertips. You know what I'm saying? So, is it possible? Probably, but I wouldn't count on being able to do that. So, what could the spear hands be for the average person defending themselves? It could become, a spear hand to the jugular veins on either side of the throat instead, in which you could spear hand that way rather than the inverted. Yeah. You spear hand here, inverted, and then grip and then block out. All right. Well, here you could spear hand upward to the jugular veins on either side of the neck, or you could spear hand to the larynx and esophagus and trachea right here in the throat, and basically, choke the person to death or choke them out at least unconscious by crushing their windpipe. Um, that's a lot easier to do and believe than breaking somebody's floater ribs with a spear hand. Okay, so you probably want to spear hand to the throat, and that's the way we actually practice the regular spear hand in the dojo. Is we assume we're spear handing to a soft target such as the throat. Um, uh, there is a ridge hand in Isshinryu. We just don't practice it very often because it's a little less practical, and you can end up breaking your own thumb or hyperextending your own elbow with a ridge hand strike. Whereas with the traditional karate chop or knife hand strike, if you hit too hard, the worst case scenario is you break your own hand, but you don't hyperextend your own elbow. All right. Um, so, you know, you're better off if you broke this finger with a knife hand strike or a karate chop than if you broke your thumb, because then you have no grip whatsoever. And if you threw a ridge hand, and even if you didn't break your thumb, but you hyperextended your own elbow, then you just injured your own self worse than your opponent probably even knew he could do. Okay, so that's why we don't practice the ridge hand as much as the other basic hand strikes in Isshinryu. Um, but we do know it's there, and we do know how to use it, and we do practice it enough to be, pretty devastating with it in the right situation. Because if you ridge hand somebody across the throat and you actually hit them in the throat, that's the end of the fight. All right. Same thing as a karate chop. If you karate chop them in the throat and you actually hit them correctly, that's going to end the fight. And like, I don't recommend doing that except in a handicap match. If you're outnumbered 2 or more to 1 in a street self-defense situation, then you can escalate to that level of force. But I would not recommend doing that otherwise, unless you're in a military engagement and need to actually kill or capture an enemy in hand-to-hand combat. That's the only other time I would recommend doing that. All right, so yes, it's believable that some of the Goju-Ryu and some Isshinryu practitioners who practice that enough could, in fact, break your floater ribs. But I've never seen one in person other than Sensei Mark that I would believe could do it. Um, so, you know, it's plausible, but I've never seen it done. I would like to see somebody that could do it to ballistics dummy gel, and then we would have, like, where if they hit the ballistics dummy so hard that it actually ruptured the gel and broke the ribs somehow, then it would be confirmed. But I've never seen that. I have seen fight science videos on television where people proved they could in fact punch a ballistics dummy gel so hard that it broke the skull of the dummy inside the gel. So real punches and kicks can in fact hit that hard, if the martial artist has practiced it long enough and hard enough. All right, thank you, and have a nice day.